There are times when we're all biased, when we really want to believe something is true, and that clouds our judgment. That's true for us as sales consultants. What if you want to protect your company's interests or your own? What if you have different values from your client? How do you still act in integrity and build trust with your client in those situations? The answer is simple. You recognize your bias and you just admit it. The best policy is transparency. And what's remarkable is that research shows that people will trust your advice more when you disclose that you're biased than they would if you hadn't said you were biased. How is that possible? Let's take a look at the research. In one study, researchers looked at patients who were talking to surgeons about prospective surgeries. As background here, surgeons are known for being pretty biased about surgery. They're typically very confident in their craft. And so, where another doctor might tell you to have physical therapy or do a medical treatment, a surgeon is much more likely to advise a patient to go under the knife. Now, a few years ago, hospital administrators noticed this was happening and they got worried. So they started requiring surgeons to disclose their bias when talking to patients and tell them that they should get a second opinion. What do you think happened after they made that policy change? Did people get surgery less often? Big ol' nope. The opposite was true. People actually got 3 times as many surgeries if the surgeon told them that they were biased and to go get a second opinion. What's going on here? Maybe this is just about surgery. Once again, big old nope. When you look at financial advice, the same effect holds. And researchers have found this in many other fields as well. If financial advisors disclose that they have a conflict of interest when they suggest a stock to a client, their clients are more likely, in fact, much more likely, to buy that stock. So, what's going on here? First, everyone's already wondering whether someone has an angle. So, you can't actually make it any worse by admitting that you do have an angle. Secondly, people who are being manipulative don't say that they're being manipulative. Here's the reality check. When you are biased about a topic, your client already knows it. In fact, they probably think you're more biased than you actually are. Your clients are already taking your statements with a big grain of salt whenever they think that your interests don't align with theirs. You can make that grain of salt a lot smaller by calling out exactly how you're biased. Secondly, manipulative people don't generally admit that they're being manipulative. Disclosing bias is something trustworthy people do. It speaks to your character that you're willing to admit that your judgment might be a little clouded by your own interests on a topic. If you show your client that you're willing to admit your bias, you can actually increase their trust in your advice. They'll begin to expect that you will call yourself out whenever you're biased, which means that they don't have to keep wondering whether you're biased about a particular subject. So let's talk about some examples of where we could begin to admit our bias in order to build trust with our clients.